Bumoto ka ng tama. Bumoto ka ng tama. Bumoto ka ng tama. Para sa kabubuti ng ating bansa. Bumoto ka ng tama. Kahit maraming kandidato, tingnan na ang bawat isa. Pumili ng edukado. Bumoto ka ng tama. Kailangan ang boto mo ng ating bayan. Kaya bumoto ka sa susunod na eleksyon.
All right. Hi, Sachi. Thank you again for taking the time off to speak and share up your advocacy. First, let's start with introductions. If you could introduce yourself and what you're up to these days.
Hi Lorenzo, so I'm Sachi Lozano. I'm 18 years old. I'm currently on a gap year to really grow the university archive, and I have spent the majority of this gap year pursuing a program with the School of the New York Times, but now that I'm back, I'm really full force growing and developing the university archive.
Can you talk us more about the University Archive, what it is, and what was the inspiration behind it?
Yeah, of course. So the University Archive, in a nutshell, is an online publication, and we're working towards being a nonprofit organization that really seeks to amplify the voices of the marginalized and really give the unheard and the unseen a voice. So we do this with two primary ways. The first one, and our main focus, is really by telling these stories, interviewing members of different communities and individuals, and also by our subscription platform, where we encourage readers to subscribe to the University Archive for 100 pesos a month, so that their 100 pesos can go to the communities we work with. And in that way, we're translating the reflections that people have from these articles and from reading and getting to know the people we interview to practical action and ways that they can start and be part of the change that we want to create.
That's a really great advocacy, especially now that we're living in times of uncertainty, especially with the current administration who's really against freedom of speech and freedom of association and all that. And it's interesting also because your volunteer writers and translators, right? They're your age, like 18 plus. So my question would be, why is it important for people our age to speak up against the government, and why not just let the adults do that?
Well, yes, everybody in AA is very young, and actually, I would say I'm part of an older group. I notice a lot of our volunteers are getting younger and younger, which is very exciting. And I think it's important for the youth to get involved because it is our future that we are working towards. And I think if we leave it to the adults, then there's no accountability there. I mean, sort of leaving it to the adults puts the blame on them for the future that we're going to walk into, instead of taking control and taking charge in our own little ways. And I also think that there are strengths in the different generations, and there's a lot of power in these generations collaborating with one another instead of just leaving it to another generation.
All right, Sachi, for our audiences naman who want to get involved with your organization, how can they utilize that opportunity through the Adversity Archive? And maybe you could also segue, because I've heard that you all have a new campaign for the Halalan season. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so for anybody who wants to get involved, we regularly call for volunteers, and we're always looking for people who are enthusiastic about our mission and what we're doing. And we just invite anybody to use their talents in any way that they can, whether creatively, by creating graphics and videos, or through externals work, working with other people, looking for partnerships, or of course through writing and translating, which is what AA primarily does. We call for volunteers, so just stay tuned in AA, just look out for the posts. But also, if anybody wants to get involved now, don't hesitate to directly message AA, and we'll get back to you with whatever opportunities we might have for you. As far as the Halalan campaign, yes, we're about to launch. I believe we launch on the 15th. And basically, the Halalan campaign, AA's take on Halalan, is we are going to be doing a survey of prominent party lists, specifically regarding the fields of education, health, and labor. And we are basically going to be juxtaposing the work of these party lists with the communities that they claim to be working with, and really just crafting a narrative that gives our readers a pretty good understanding of where the party list is, what they stand for, and ultimately what they're doing for the communities that they claim to be working with. And it's primarily geared towards first-time youth voters, because this is probably the least talked about or least covered area of the elections, but it is equally as important. And as a publication that really focuses on the communities, we want to speak about party lists because they do represent the interests of these communities, and we want to, and that aligns very much with our vision of giving the unheard and unseen a voice.
And lastly, maybe for our audiences out there who are apolitical, or let's say people to tell themselves that, well, I'm not really interested in politics. Why should they be interested?
I think because even if you think it doesn't affect you, I think it does. It definitely does. And I do believe, I think for me, one of the reasons that I got into politics is because I really believed it didn't affect me. And you know, generally speaking, as somebody who lives a fairly privileged life, the change in government doesn't drastically affect me the way that it would more marginalized groups. But I think that is even more reason for me, who isn't, you know, generally affected, to want to help those who are so dependent on this government, because we do live in a country where the majority is uneducated and is dependent on what the government does. And we've seen, I think, in the last 6 years how fatal it can be when power is in the hands of the wrong people. So I do think for everybody who's apolitical, it doesn't mean you being political or being involved in an active member of society doesn't necessarily mean taking a side or just choosing a politician, but it just means being more considerate and having concern for other people, especially those who are generally affected by the shift in government.